29th of the 12th, 2024. The time is 6 minutes past 10, and there are very many F1 centric threads at which we need to get it together, Cameron. What's wrong with your enunciation? We need to talk about Juan Pablo Montoya because he's talking about who's favourite for 2025 and the Drivers' Championship in particular. So too, we need to talk about McLaren because they've had some things to say about allegations that they were breaking the rules to ultimately gain themselves a constructors in 2024. Flavio Briatore's talked about Max Verstappen. So too, FIA have clapped back at people saying that they need to change the rules, change the load test with a view to clamp down on what was one of the most controversial topics of 2024. Of course, we're talking about Flexi Winggate. So too, we need to talk about Helmut Marko, who's been particularly insightful, giving an interview talking about the clause that could dictate where Maximilian Verstappen's future lies on the grid. Oh, the humanity, ladies and gentlemen. This is techie than techie things. Let's talk about the FIA in the first instance. So I don't get these bods. I don't understand why they are so stuck in their way. Stubbornness is their forte, but some say that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable to change. What are we doing then, FIA? You had yourself a massive scandal on your hands. First, it was inertia valve. You didn't even have the metrics nor the regulatory rules in place, the guidelines to secure that. Inertia valve was a conversation, if indeed it was ever a thing on a Red Bull car. Then we had ourselves cool tyres gate. People said that McLaren and Red Bull potentially were putting water in their tyres with a view to decrease the rate at which their tyres were degging. That faded to black all of a sudden. But the most controversial topic as far as the technical spec regulations was, of course, Flexi Ring Gate. You saw at the Italian Grand Prix what Lando Norris's Flexi Wing looked like. One of these, it was orthogonal to the foundational plane. That, ladies and gentlemen, if it's not allowed already, then you need to make sure that you institute for the load tests accordingly. Surely we can't have that. Then it was Mini DRS. Oscar Piastri leveraged that to get his first victory. Baku settings. Ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, what are we doing here? And then the FIA come out and say this. We're pretty happy with what we've seen. I hasten to say that it's not a question of always being happy or not. It's also a question of whether you feel that a meaningful test can be made. Obviously, there was a lot of hoo-ha about it in the summer and early autumn. Tom Bassis, FIA bod, said, "We had made it quite clear to teams since 2022 at least that we're not planning to introduce any further tests on the front wing," and we stuck with that. What are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? I don't understand why the FIA are still the FIA. Surely at this point, they are not fit for purpose. Their attitude is ridiculous. Continuous improvement should be their lot. But as at December 2024, it's nothing of the sort. Suffice to say that they will not bring in additional load tests. Ergo, next year, the only conversation we'll be having about tech spec will be Flexi Wings. Ferrari have already told us that they intend on capitalising on this. McLaren got the leap last year. All the other teams are now hip to it. Bring on Flexi Winggate 2025 because they will all be at it. This is what F1 teams do. Scratch and scrape for every millisecond of durable competitive advantage. Oh, and by the way, on favourites, because the conversation is now cast to 2025, speaking specifically on who's going to win the Drivers' Championship. You let me know who you've got in the chat, because for the avoidance of doubt, currently Lando Norris is the favourite. The bookmakers, the forensic accounting favourites. Montoya's chimed in on this. He says for Verstappen next year, it'll be very difficult as a season if indeed he harbours aspirations of winning himself races and therefore championships. If Red Bull can't suddenly make a big step, it'll be really difficult for him to become champion 5-time back-to-back champion. It will be difficult for him with the car that he has at the moment. They just don't have the speed that they need. So I don't see him as favourite. If you look at the last Formula One races of the year, it's impossible to see Max Verstappen as favourite anymore. Oh, the humanity, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. This is chaos. That Max Verstappen's not favourite. And Lando Norris is, by dint of the durable competitive advantage that he has in terms of his car. Nobody could argue in good faith that McLaren didn't have the quickest car as at the second half of the year last year. Of course they did. But are we going to bet against Red Bull making a material step forward? Is that something that you're prepared to bet against? Is that the hill on which you're prepared to die? And if indeed that does happen, if we're playing F1 hypotheticals, are you going to bet against Max Verstappen? You guys know on this channel the one rule of it is as follows: thou shalt never bet against one Maximilian Verstappen, 4 soon to be 5-time champions, some say. And why do I say that? Stop glazing Max Verstappen, Cameron. The naysayers will say, well, listen, I'm an evidence-based guy. Brazil wasn't that many moons ago, and I've been watching in the off-season lots of 2021, again with a view to understand the difference. Silverstone 21, sprint race settings, Brazil 2021. So too, Brazil 2016. If we're going to go back in our 21 bag, we talked about turn 1 Mexico yesterday. I don't understand what this dude eats for breakfast, Kayla. It's chaos. We will see indeed, Kayla, whether they can build a car. And a lot of this stuff that we're talking about will depend upon that. Oh, and by the way, speaking of McLaren allegations, the Red Bull guys and girls have come out on the front foot saying that they think McLaren won a Constructors last year because of some of their skullduggery, because of some of their underhanded techie bits. Police Series Exhibit B, A even, bloody flexi wing, and then mini DRS on the back. These were innovations that McLaren leveraged, were they not? And Maximilian Verstappen yesterday spoke about it. He said McLaren will never ever admit it, but we know they were up to something. That a lot of the points that they accrued, Oscar Piastri is a good example at Baku, was by dint of some of their underhanded tricks. But again, this is F1. I would argue that we'd be naive as a F1 community if we didn't expect F1 teams to bend/break the rules. Ross Brawn settings: read the rules once to see what they say, and a second time to see what they do not say, so that you can bend and break those rules to the end of durable competitive advantage. Horner echoes Maximilian Verstappen's sentiments. Here's what Andrea Stella said with a view to clap back. Sometimes, we've seen particularly with the water in the tyre stories, you have to deal with disinformation. It's a strong word from Andrea Stella, team principal of the papaya coloured team. He continues, and I quote, "These are things that you know are completely false, but then it becomes news and you cannot ignore it. You have to deal with it in some way." That's been a new dimension for the team that hadn't been fighting for wins for the longest time. And herein lies the problem with McLaren, ladies and gentlemen. They are now operating in rarefied air, a very unique space. Most F1 teams and drivers come and go from the sport without ever having a whiff of consistent victories, let alone championships. This then is what they're dealing with. Red Bull have got their elbows out from a PA perspective, politicking, getting in front of the FIA race director et al., just like they did in 21. And so McLaren, if indeed they harbour aspirations to do the double next year, when the drivers, in addition to the constructors, are going to have to deal with this in real time. Because this is advantage, and this is what F1 teams do: accuse each other of cheating and underhandedness. It is sometimes true, sometimes it's not true though. F1 teams are going to F1. Oh, and by the way, did we all consider being not? Yeah, let's go, Jay. Oh, and by the way, Fabio Briatore, legend of F1, again, colourful figure, sometimes skullduggerous too. Is this not just the oldest truism in F1 history? That you will get characters come and go in Formula One who are skullduggerous, who don't hesitate to bend and break the rules. Surely, if that's a thing, then Fabio Briatore is your case in point. No, he epitomises that thesis. I'll never forget Matt Bishop on Colossally. That's history. brilliant podcast saying as follows about Fabio Briatore, that Ron Dennis got 100 million because of his team seizing IP from another team, Ferrari at the time. 100 million fine that he received for that. The chap who was in charge of all regulatory things at the time, Max Mosley, said as follows: 100 million was your punishment. 95 million of that was for being a douchebag. 5 million of that was for was a punishment for the crime. This, ladies and gentlemen, gets really, really techie, because only a couple of years later, Fabio Briatore, by dint of his team principal of Renault/Benetton, was doing exactly the same thing, but he managed that better than Ron Dennis. He flew straight to Monaco to beg and ask for forgiveness from Max Mosley, and he didn't get not even 1 penny worth of fine. That's what we're dealing with as far as F1. Your success, your ability to win races and therefore championships, is by dint of your ability to manage relationships, kiss babies, shake hands and curry favour with the most important stakeholders. And Fabio knows that. Andrea Stella needs to get on board with that. So too Zach Brown. Fabio, this is what he said about Maximilian Verstappen's not insubstantial achievements over the past 3 years. There have been many good champions besides Verstappen in those years, but if you're going to pick, what is the pick to click? If you're going to choose champions between, say, a Sebastian Vettel as a 4-time and Max Verstappen as a 4-time, then your guess is as good as mine. This is the remit of the people. Indeed, the F1 community will decide who's the best 4-time champion, Sebastian Vettel. But let me put this forth as a supposition, Fabio Briatore. Sebastian Vettel, as good as he was, as committed as he was, shouldn't even be in the same conversation as Max Verstappen if we're talking about ability behind the wheel. No chance. Sebastian Vettel was good in a very strict set of circumstances when he had the bloody exhaust and he was able to dictate the extent to which the car oversteered on low minimum speed turns. However, around a Spa-Francorchamps or a Silverstone, you're going to tell me that in an equal machinery, Sebastian Vettel will be able to hang with Maximilian Verstappen? Bull feathers, no chance. Calling it now. There is that no chance. Listen, it's barbershop talk. Ultimately, we'll never be able to prove conclusively whether Sebastian Vettel in his pomp or prime even would be able to take it to a fire-breathing dragon in Maximilian Verstappen. We'll never know. It's a good conversation though, eh? I very much doubt it. Here's what Fabio said. As you know, it's very difficult to compare, but I've already said Verstappen is rightfully champion this season because he's the best, and people have to decide for themselves whether he's better than Vettel. Decide for themselves, Fabio. Pull the other one, sir. Do you know what I mean? What are we doing here? Fabio continues, and I quote, talking about next season and Lando Norris's multitudinous mistakes. The problem for Norris as compared to Verstappen this season was that he's experienced. He's still young, maybe too young. Well, I don't know about all that, Fabio. Aren't Lando Norris and Maximilian Verstappen the same age? Lando Norris has been in F1 some years now, 6. I think next year will be his 7th season. He's not a novice nor an amateur anymore. Some would argue that that makes him a grizzled F1 vet. I would beg to differ, Sir Fabio. Next year might be better as far as Lando's concerned. The experience of this season can help in any case. When asked the question, was Max Verstappen's title in 2024 ever in danger? Fabio says as follows: no, Max Verstappen becoming champion, I knew that and I saw it. Why? That's very simple, because Max is the best. No kidding. Sherlock is and has been for some time, some would argue. Fabio Briatore continues, and I quote, then you also become champion in difficult years. It may not have been very easy with the World Red Bull car and or team this year, but the quality of the driver is decisive. You see that with Mr. Verstappen. Yeah, no kidding, Sherlock. BX Gunner says Vettel battled multiple champions in his era of dominance. BX Gunner, but what happened after that? Let's talk about Seb. Controversial figure this, because there is no halfway house as far as Sebastian Vettel. I just think it's techie. I really didn't like Seb at the time. Listen, and that wasn't notwithstanding his multitudinous achievements. 4-time champion, back to back to back, 2010 to 2013. He wasn't bad, was he? But what happened after that? BX Gunner, how did he fare after his very favourable circumstances at Red Bull? Adrian Newey Merchant is how he fared. Bending and breaking the rules is a prerequisite for innovation and thus improvement, a double-edged sword. I don't hate it. I don't hate it, Remco. I think you're onto something there, mate. It is, what else would we expect? Naivete to expect anything else from F1 teams at this stage. Good morning, Dean. I hope you're all right, mate. The problem for Lando will be Oscar and willing to be a good little boy. See, Remco, I know where you've got that. That's Mr. Windsor's thesis. I think Oscar Piastri, I think me and Mr. Windsor respectfully disagree on this. I think all roads to a driver's championship for Lando go through Max Verstappen and also Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Of course, McLaren need to get their arms around the dynamic between the driver pairing. That is Messrs Piastri and Norris. But I think the hill, the steepest hill, the one with the most acute gradient, is those other bods. That's the hill that Lando Norris will need to climb. Those are the dragons for which he will need to slay in 2025. It's going to get techie, I'm telling you. I can't wait. I don't know if I'm the only one. In it, what are your thoughts on I don't know who that is. Karthik. I wish the breadth and depth of my F1 knowledge was sufficient to where I could answer that question, but I just don't know, mate, to be honest. Go on then. Let's talk about Helmut Marko clause, because that's the last topic on the docket today. Good morning, dear More. I hope you're good. Helmut Marko's given an interview with Das Telegraph, Dutch newspaper. Techie, get access to all the most pertinent stakeholders as far as Netherlands F1 is concerned, and they've done an interview with Helmut Marko, and it's gotten very techie. You remember table setting time. You remember a couple of cycles ago there was a lot of talk around a Helmut Marko clause in Max Verstappen's contract. In fact, let me take a step back before I go into this. Reading Unstoppable by Mark Hughes, Max Verstappen and his team have always leveraged even performance clauses. Well, you remember 2018, 2017, 2016, there was a lot of talk as to whether Red Bull would ever build Max Verstappen a car capable of winning championships, fit for purpose, matching his not insubstantial talents behind the wheel, to where Max Verstappen and his team, Vermeulen and father of Max, one Jos Verstappen, were considering other options in real time. Because if Red Bull couldn't build Max their Charge A car, then why hang around? Hence, every single year they would bake into their contract a performance clause, meaning that Max and team could null and void his contract in real time with immediate effect if indeed they had not given him a car commensurate for his not insubstantial talents. That was no different. There was a Marko clause in there that said if Helmut Marko left, then so too could one Maximilian Verstappen dissolve his contract with immediate effect. That's how tight Max and Helmut are. You'll have heard Max say on a gazillion occasions that loyalty is everything. We need to keep the key personnel in addition to building ourselves a car capable of winning races and therefore championships. Ergo, if Helmut Marko leaves, I don't know why I'd want to hang around. Helmut Marko, there is loyalty here, and Helmut Marko talks to this. Why would I stay at Red Bull if indeed my guy Helmut Marko isn't here? There is history between the two of them. 2015, when it was Toro Rosso's settings, beef between Sainz camp and the Verstappen camp. There was talk and conversations. You'll recall Franz Tost told his team, Toro Rosso, to act in a way that was uniform across both garages. Max Verstappen went out once, very, very late for Monaco qualifying and made a mistake. Jos Verstappen says, Helmut, what are we doing here? You give my guy the best chance to optimise for his not insubstantial talent, and that doesn't look like sending him out late. He's 17 years old. He's a kid. He doesn't even have a driving licence, for Pete's sake. What are we doing here? Said Jos Verstappen. Helmut Marko said, you know what, Jos, you are right. Toro Rosso bods on Max Verstappen's side of the garage. Listen to me. Don't listen to Franz Tost. You now report to me. You do what I tell you to do. You act in the best interest of Max Verstappen, because I've worked hard to get him into this team, baited off, staved off Toto Wolff and Mercedes, who wanted Max Verstappen. You're not going to lose him by giving him the run instructions. You lot report to me, not Franz Tost, team principal of Toro Rosso. Franz Tost said, all right then, is that true? If you guys listen to him, then you will be sacked, because this is a team, an F1 team, and we need to act in a way that's fair and uniform across the piece. Helmut Marko told them. That's what Franz Tost responded, said, you know what? I'm not having this. We are an F1 team. You guys listen to me. Helmut Marko said, no, you listen to me. And they listened to him. Some of those Toro Rosso buds got sacked. Helmut Marko did the right thing and got them jobs at the big team Red Bull. That was the chaos then. And that's why Helmut Marko feels like he owes a debt of gratitude to Max, which is reciprocated by Max Verstappen. That's why this Helmut Marko clause is so key, especially when we're thinking about where Max Verstappen will end up. Lest we forget that Toto, the boy who cried wolf, will drop kick in the chest one King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. So too one Kimi Antonelli, if indeed he feels like he can get a whiff of Maximilian Verstappen's contract, still as at 2024 December of, can take that one to the bank. I promise you. They still need to work to keep Max Verstappen, and that means that there was a Helmut Marko clause in his contract. Max Verstappen knew that he didn't want to be at Red Bull if Helmut Marko wasn't there, but that's all changed recently. Helmut Marko's extended his term, his contract with the Bulls that are red, and no longer is there a Helmut Marko clause because of that. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where it gets techier than techie things. I know Remco, listen, it's going to have to happen at some stage. He's going to kick me off. The best Oscar goes to, I'm a supporting actor. Did you know what I mean? This is what Helmut Marko said. What's the secret? He mused to the Telegraph. Okay, so we're talking about why he's staying on. 81 years old is what Dr. Helmut Marko of Red Bull GmbH is. Why is he staying on so long? He says passion. He says, I've never had any major health problems. I drink a little less than I used to, and I get up at 5 or 6 a.m. every single morning. Props, Dr. Helmut Marko. He continues, one thing's for sure is that Max Verstappen and the Verstappens are loyal. You can count on them. For me, of course, those words from Max were very nice. He's one of the greatest sportsmen in the world, earns a lot of money, but above all, he sticks to his principles, and that hasn't changed since he was 14 years old. Why, Dr. Helmut Marko, change the clause? Why extend your contract, Helmut Marko? And here's the pertinent point, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. He says, I stayed on to lay the foundations for a successful company in the near future, the short to medium term. I've known the Verstappens for quite some time, and the Verstappens are quite special. That much is clear. And that's why now you've got so many bods on the grid that are courtesy of the not insubstantial scouting abilities of one Dr. Helmut Marko. Lest we forget, in 2025 on the grid, these are the guys who have come through the hands of Helmut Marko and his Red Bull Junior program. They are as follows: Max Verstappen, Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar, Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz Jr., Jack Doohan, Pierre Gasly. 8 of the 20, that's as near as makes no difference. 50% of the grid that will be starting in 2025 have come into the sport by dint of Helmut Marko's not insubstantial scouting abilities. That, ladies and gentlemen, is chaos. That is the power of one Dr. Helmut Marko. Listen, if Max Verstappen goes to another team, Helmut Marko will have something to say in that decision. Now that the Helmut Marko clause is no longer there, I don't want to say that disables Max Verstappen from going to another team, because these contracts are always a moving target, malleable in real time, but it makes it less likely, materially so. No Helmut Marko clause in Maximilian Verstappen's contract as at December of 2024. What does that mean going forward? This, ladies and gentlemen, is techier than techie things. But I digress.